A recent research by Deloitte claims that the smartphone accessory industry is projected to be worth 77 billion US dollars in 2020. So, I decided to have a close look at the number of smartphone accessories that me and people around me bought in the last couple of years. And I kid you not, this prediction may not be an exaggeration. We'll take into consideration some of the most commonly bought smartphone accessories and analyze how people spend money on them. For this, let's start with the most basic smartphone accessory that almost everyone buys, which is a smartphone case. You see, nowadays, most smartphones out there are made out of glass. This is done in order to sell you a premium looking and feeling smartphone. However, glass is fragile and it needs some sort of protection in order to ensure that it does not shatter every time you drop the phone. And therefore, the smartphone case industry has boomed exponentially in the last few years. Most of the smartphone cases that you buy are either made from plastic or from silicone. These cases are generally pretty poor quality and you have to replace them quite often. So depending upon how much you are into smartphone cases, over a span of 12 to 18 months, it's very likely that you've got at least 2 cases for your smartphone. And again, you might have got some pretty cheap and low quality cases, but over time, it all adds up. From here, we'll shift our focus onto the most controversial trend of the last decade, which is the removal of headphone jack from smartphones. Undoubtedly, this has been done in order to give the wireless headphone and earphone industry a massive push, and smartphone manufacturers have more or less succeeded in doing so. Buying a pair of truly wireless earphones is almost becoming a norm in 2020. On one hand, you've got some pretty expensive and premium earphones like AirPods and AirPods Pro, but on the other hand, you also have a lot of very capable yet affordable offerings. But regardless of their price and positioning in the market, all these Bluetooth headphones and truly wireless earphones have one problem, which is the lithium-ion battery that powers them. You see, this is the very same kind of battery that powers your smartphone. And the drawback here is that it deteriorates over time. Compare the battery life of your brand new smartphone versus when it's 1 year old and you'll exactly know what I mean. So, while initially you might be quite impressed with the claimed 24-hour battery life of your Bluetooth headphone or truly wireless earphone, but the truth is that over time, that battery life will fall down. Then comes durability. When compared to your old school wired earphones or headphones, these new age Bluetooth headphones are much more technically complicated because they have to house a built-in battery and a chipset. And that also means that they are much less durable. So, if you drop them quite often or if your usage is rough, these earphones and headphones are infamous for developing connectivity issues. So eventually, you'll either be tempted or be forced to upgrade to a pair of new truly wireless earbud or a Bluetooth headphone. Moving on. While the battery capacity of smartphones is getting higher year on year, so is an average person's addiction. Today, PUBG addiction has become quite alarming. And if you're not addicted to PUBG, it is still quite likely that you spend hours on your smartphone watching Netflix or YouTube. So in this case, no amount of battery life is good enough. Therefore, enter power banks. Granted, most of the power banks are not super expensive and they come well within the budget. But these power banks have the very same problem as your smartphone or as your truly wireless earbuds, which is their battery does deteriorate over time. Eventually, its battery life will go down, thereby forcing you to upgrade to a new one. Now, I'd like to mention a category which is not a part of the previously mentioned Deloitte research. However, it's still worth a mention because it's really tempting. I'm talking about smart bands and smartwatches. These wearables are mostly targeted towards the fitness industry because they claim to count your daily steps and heart rate. I'm pretty positive that most of you out there have at least one friend who got such a device thinking that he or she would magically get fit immediately after buying one. But we all know that never happens. Granted, newer smartwatches, the more expensive ones, do have advanced medical features like ECG, but still, despite that, the overall usage scenario is quite limited. For most people, a smartwatch or a smart band is basically a new form of distraction. You already have one distraction in your pocket and now you also have one on your wrist. And this distraction can also prove to be pretty expensive. Obviously, I'm not saying that smartphone accessories are totally a waste of money. You have a lot of useful ones out there as well. For instance, braided cables. They make a lot of sense because most of the cables that come bundled with your smartphone are pretty low quality. Then we've got Bluetooth speakers. If you're a music enthusiast, then buying a Bluetooth speaker makes sense because let's face it, smartphone speakers are pretty underwhelming. Granted, nowadays, accessories are an integral part of the smartphone ecosystem. But the point is, while in isolation, these accessories may not cost all that much, when you combine all the things, they add up pretty quickly. We live in an era where most modern electronics are purposely designed with a short lifespan, just so that you can upgrade them after a while. And then is the brilliant marketing which a lot of companies do. So in many cases, you might not need something, but the marketing is so good that you'll probably end up buying one because it looks so tempting. Therefore, next time you shell out money on a smartphone accessory, just ask yourself first if you really need it or not.